So let's look at a couple of solo games, board games that I enjoy playing. Now, certainly these are not exclusively solo. They have a co-op or they have a player type count to it. But I enjoy board gaming. I mean, wargaming, role-playing board gaming. I enjoy the board gaming experience because I'm plugged in all day digitally. There's just something nice about the analog. There's something about sitting down, engaging my imagination, and the physical components of the game. Picking up the dice, looking at the cards, moving the figure around, imagining kind of where I am on the board. I mean, I have a number of board games that are one-to-one ports on my tablet, and a great example would be Talisman. It's fun. I enjoy playing it, but there is something to be said. There is something to be said for physical. So physical solo board games on here. These are games that I can set up and play in a sitting, maybe an afternoon, or I can set up and play over the course of a couple of days or kind of maybe a week on there from start to finish and explore different tactics with how it works. What's not included in this criteria is something like Gloomhaven or something like Kingdom Death Monster. These are amazing solo experiences. But they are a campaign. They are something that you sit down. When I feel like, it's time to do some KDM, some Kingdom Death Monster, I'm setting that up for a month, and I'm leaving it, and I'm playing maybe an hour or two a night or every other night on there. So I'm going to leave those off. Same with Gloomhaven. That's something you want to set up and play for a while. Amazing experiences, but I want to kind of shrink it down a little bit in terms of playtime and exploring and looking at it from there. So my first choice, Descent, 3rd edition. Classic fantasy overland RPG type game. You fight some various monsters. You've got character development. You've got a bunch of different choices, how you want to level up and what you want to explore. There's a story in there, different missions, different chapters, different characters. It plays really, really well, and it plays really, really nice. You can play with one character. Plays fine. You can play controlling 2 or 3 characters on there, and it plays pretty fast because you are making all of the decisions. It has a couple of unique features in terms of terrain dice, and combat is utilized through these tokens, these runes that you cast that equal success, failure, and powers and upgrading your equipment. It is my go-to kind of generic, I like Terranoth, but kind of my generic overland role-playing game type system. So that is certainly up there. Second to that, if I take it down a level, Descent 2nd edition. Now, as soon as you start adding in some of the expansions, there's a little bit of bloat on there. There's a couple of pieces where it slows down a little bit, but I think it's a fine dungeon crawler. And the reason why I recommend it for solo, it's an overlord system, one versus many. It's a lot of fun playing it that way. But the reason why I recommend it for solo is there are expansions to automate a random dungeon, and there is also an amazing app. So from those 2 pieces alone, and the app pulls in the pieces of your collection and lets you play and lets you maneuver. I love the idea of Runebound 3rd and Descent 2nd because I'm exploring the world of Terranoth from 2 different angles, kind of macro and micro on there. Then we move into Dark Souls. Now, this game is interesting because there's a grind to it. You go through, you clear rooms, you get souls, you buy random gear. You level up. When you think you're ready, you go for a mini-boss. Assuming you survive that mini-boss, you take on more rooms and take on the main boss. And then you take on the mega-boss, which is just, they're kind of crazy with the power level that they have. There's a monster AI. The monster AI for the minions, the wasteoids, the destructoids, it's okay. It's pretty one-sided. They kind of move and attack or dodge and attack or attack and then move. But the bosses, the mini-bosses, the mega-bosses, and the really, really big bosses, the AI is very, very interesting. It's card-driven. They heat up. They get really angry and pissed when you wound them at a certain point. They really keep you on their toes. This works well solo because you can put in an hour or 2 of play. And it's good, and it's tactical, and you're leveling up. It's essentially Diablo. It's like, why haven't we made a tabletop Diablo yet? Dark Soul fans are like, you just dared to compare our IP to Diablo. Well, look, I'm getting the souls and I'm getting the gear. But it all comes down to that boss fight on there. Do you want to invest 2 or 3 hours with a group and then just get pounded by the boss? I mean, you got to get good, literally, on there. But I really enjoy the atmosphere, the miniatures, the setup, the solo play, the customization, everything that's on there. Now let's flip for a second, card games. And we've got a couple of other little board game elements to look at and explore. Pathfinder, the adventure card game, works really well. A lot of different modules to explore, a lot of adventures to explore, a lot of different characters before we get into the adventure packs and the expansion packs on there. It's got replayability because even once you've completed an adventure, you go through again and you do it with different characters, and you also get to do it with different gear and different items and different encounters. I find that it engages my mind because you explore locations, you build a deck. So if I'm going to go explore the abandoned tower, it'll tell you ahead of time, populate that tower with 3 enemies, 2 events, 1 trap, and you build a deck based on the theme. You mix it up, you flip over a card, and you encounter it. And you have to resolve it by making skill checks or fighting. I find it engages my imagination. Why is there a chest in the tower? Why is this monster in the tower? Now, it's random, and there is somewhat of a theme to it, but it's interesting to spin the story as you play. The only kind of disclaimer, as of this podcast, Pazio is releasing an updated version of the game. So now you're into the decision, do you want to kind of go for that, or do you want to back buy the older edition? It's good either way. Maybe wait and watch, but it's a good card-based type game. On the flip side, the hardest, most challenging, difficult game I own, Xenoshift. And I can't recommend it enough. It is multiplayer, but it's almost like you need to play this solo because the rage that it is going to induce in a good way doesn't always go over so well. So the idea is you're on this alien planet. It's a card-based game. You're mining Xenosathium. You're in command of a mercenary company with various units, and it's a base defense game. So you spend your resources, you draw your cards, and you lay out some bad space bugs out there. You flip them over and you fight them. And it's 9 waves. You need to survive 9 waves, and it is insane, and it is punishing, and you spend a couple of months playing it, and you've got some good combos. You know how the internals work, but the game is still brutal. It's just brutal on there, but in a great way, and it has a small footprint, and it sets up fast. I've played this game with friends, and they've been like, why did we just spend 40 minutes getting just totally destroyed on there? Maybe that works for your group. But for solo, I find it very challenging and very, very interesting. So we've got those 2 kind of card aspects of the game in there. Let's flip over to board game recommendations to finish out the podcast. You can see a theme. I like dungeon crawling type games on there. Blackstone Fortress. Certainly I'm a 40K enthusiast, but even if you're not a 40K enthusiast, there's enough background and lore in the game itself that will really pull you in. So essentially there's this old tech, there's this space fortress from the old ones, from the War in Heaven, and you're playing the role of a rogue trader who's kind of like a space pirate for the good guys. You go in and you explore this random fortress, and the idea is to penetrate the vault. What lies in the vault, I will not tell you. It is a sealed card that will be revealed. So over the course of a campaign, random dungeons are generated with random bad guys appropriate for the Blackstone Fortress. You go in with a team, you level up, you get gear, you find clues, you find enough clues, you take on one of the fortress vaults, you defeat 3 of them, and then you move into the actual final vault. The game has just been released as of this podcast back in December. Expansions are on the way. It's really interesting because the mechanics are fast, they're slick, the miniatures are amazing, and it's a dungeon crawl in space. That's something, even if you're not a massive 40K fan like I am, you look past that. We don't have a lot of really good dungeon crawls in space. So it's very, very interesting from that perspective. The last 2, and these are in there for kind of diverse reasons, but you're going to have to do a little bit of research on these recommendations to see if they really, really fit into your kind of gaming personality. The Dungeons and Dragons adventure systems, specifically Temple of Elemental Evil. You flip a tile, some monsters spawn, you beat them, you resolve an event, you flip another tile, you explore a random dungeon, and you fight some sort of monster at the end, an Etten, a dragon, an elemental lord, things like that with it. There's various adventure paths, Wrath of a Shardalon, we've got Tomb of Annihilation. I prefer Temple of Elemental Evil. A, it has a dragon, so I need to fight a dragon. B, it has what I believe to be kind of the classic D&D monsters that you see, where the other sets have some interesting monsters, but they're kind of way out there, or just that stock fantasy, they don't really have it with it. The game is kind of simple. Flip, roll, explore, beat on some monsters, level up, get some gear. It plays out completely random. The events are a little bit punishing, but its simplicity is its charm. It does as it's instructed on the box. I think a lot of people go in expecting D&D, where it's more like, hey, here's the D&D narrative for it. Bonus points, it works for solo. It's got replayability. Bonus points because it scales really well to a younger audience on there. So you want to bring the kids in on kind of a D&D type board game. It works. Zombicide, Black Plague. I love Zombicide. Just everything about it, the Black Plague, swords and sorcery to take on zombies. But solo is base game only. I have all the expansions. I love utilizing the expansions. But once you start putting in all the expansions and trying to manage that and your team of 6 actors, heroes, characters, whatever, it's a little much. So I leave the expansions for when I play with friends. Otherwise, I utilize just the base core, and it works. The core is great. The last solo card game, and this is a real what if. Lord of the Rings living card game. I love it. It's a great adventure crawl system. You build your heroes. You build your deck of gear, so it's got deck building that you're going to obsess over. You then go against monsters. It's got everything from the Lord of the Rings universe in there. It is a really really solid system. Why you have to investigate it a little bit more, and I have some of the podcasts up there and videos in my archive, it's a living card game. So if you get in at this point, you have to navigate what sets you want to get, what adventure paths you want to get. Fantasy Flight is typical. The core is there, but other paths are in print. They're not in print. They're in reprint. You don't know if they'll be reprinted. So it's kind of a mess to navigate that in the moment. You really kind of got to plan out where and how you want to go, as opposed to if you're like Runebound, boom, you just buy in, or Blackstone Fortress, boom, you just buy in. The second aspect is Xenoshift is certainly hard. It's harder than Lord of the Rings living card game, but Lord of the Rings, the adventure paths, even before you get into the nightmare decks, which are jacked up, it's challenging. It is really hard. Now, I enjoy that. But being a living card game and a Fantasy Flight game on there, it is what it is. You need to invest in a little bit more than the core. You need to invest in some of the sets because they come with different characters. They come with these cards to build your deck that have items and allies and upgrades. You kind of need those to deal with things on there. So you're buying in to a lifestyle type game. You're buying into something that is very, very potent on there. And you have to be up for the challenge. You have to be up for the unlock. Even the easiest mission is hard. Now, as a solo game, that works great because I can play it. If I lose, I start it again. If I lose, I start it again. If I lose, I walk away, I come back. I look on the internet for strategies. I debate about it. I win. I feel pumped up. You bring it to play with the group, and I have. And I've got a couple of friends that we enjoy playing it. But the punishment factor in it and the difficulty factor in it, where you have to build your deck ahead of time and figure out what you want to do, it's not for a casual. It's not for the casuals out there for it. And maybe that's okay as a solo game. But I say Lord of the Rings last because while it is my favorite game, it's one of my favorite games out there, there is a buy-in factor. So those are my solo games. I won't say for the lonely gamer. But the solo gamer, maybe your life is similar to mine. You get home really, really late. 2 or 3 in the morning and you just want to kind of unwind a little bit. So you put on some background music and let's sit down and let's play some analog for like an hour. I won't say 2 hours because I got to get up the next day, but just maybe an hour, something we can play. And I can feel like I got a little bit of hobby in somewhere for the day. In the comments, across narrative and across genre, because certainly this focused on dungeon crawlers because that's what I enjoy. What solo games do you recommend? What solo games should I be taking a look at?